been southbound, I've been hellbound, riding on the midnight train. Going too fast now, think I'll slow down, standing in the pouring rain.
What's going on, guys? Tristan and Tony back with another episode of the One Hell of Life Outdoor Podcast, and we're going to have a little bit of deer hunting talk tonight. Well, I guess it's not just deer hunting. There's other
big game.
Yeah, all big game, but we're looking at it from, of course, our bow hunting perspective. But we have Mr. Justin Spring joining us on the podcast tonight, who's the executive director at Pope and Young.
Bro,
man, that's pretty cool,
dude. Like, I feel like I've entered some kind of elite status as a nobody to be able to be on the phone with the ED of Pope and Young. Justin, thank you so much for coming on the show with us tonight.
Oh, appreciate you guys having me on. It's an honor.
Yes, man, and you know, if y'all, well, I shouldn't say if y'all, but if you know, those of you that have heard the recent Ranella and Rogan podcast talking about some of the deep history of Pope and Young, that's something we're going to dive into tonight for sure. But you know, it's always been a deep part of my heart because it was a record that my mom broke, that no other person had ever done that, you know, and it was a lady 8 feet off the ground that was afraid of heights, you know, and she just knew that there was something different about a deer that was from 4 years old to 6 or 7 years old, you know, and I've watched the industry change, you know, and Justin, and you probably know this, but you know, our industry I'm talking about really specifically whitetail deer right now. You know, it was always the 4.5, you know, a mature buck is 4.5. Now we're learning a lot more, you know, that 5.5, 6.5, even 7.5. And I even watched Lee Latoski today, the other day. He goes, the only thing that trumps age is a blow up. And he said, when a deer's got a blow up, I go, uh-oh, he's 5.5. He's getting an arrow, you know. So, but we're super excited to have you on and dive into all this stuff tonight. And Justin, if you would please just kind of, if you don't mind, give us a little bit of background about yourself, you know, personally, if you don't mind a little bit, and then kind of dive into your role with Pope and Young, and we'll kind of dial it in from there.
All right, yeah, no, I you know, grew up on the Southern Oregon coast. I've been hunting and fishing my whole life. Went to school in Wisconsin for wildlife. From there, I bounced around, did some seasonal work, and then actually went to work for Boone and Crockett in their records program. I spent 15 years there, and you know, doing the records, and worked a lot with Pope and Young at the time. And then when they had this executive director job come open a year and a half, 2 years ago, I thought it was just a great opportunity. I've always been a passionate bow hunter and really, you know, appreciated the organization and their history and what they've done. And, you know, was fortunate enough to get selected for that job. And that's kind of what landed me here.
Wow. Wow. What a dream job, man. I mean, goodness. Good. And so it makes me kind of want to take a step back. And I mean, really, when you got into a job with Boone and Crockett, that had to be something else as well. I mean, just
yeah, no, it was a complete random chance. I'd applied for the job, and I actually drew an Oregon mountain goat tag, and there was an orientation class that was required, and the vice president of records was at that orientation. And the next day I got a phone call, and by the end of the week I was on a plane to Missoula.
That's awesome, man. Well, it goes to show, I mean, obviously there was a reason that they selected you, but you know, sometimes some of these things are just timing, and you know, it's who's in the room you're in, and of course you were qualified to be it. That's why you're in that position. But it's cool how, you know, timing of things, just you look back on things and you're like, man, that was meant to be, you know.
Yeah, no, man, for sure. But you know, one thing I love to do when we have guests on is to learn a little bit more deeper about them and what their experiences in the outdoor industry has been like, you know, and specifically hunting, you know, personally and that kind of thing. So kind of talk to us a little bit about, you know, your upbringing, you know, what got you inspired by hunting, and you know, what's your passions out there?
You know, I mean, my dad was a big hunter. That was a big part of my childhood, was going out with him. But I was always the next level. I mean, I'd always want to hunt everything I could, duck hunt, bear hunt, you name whatever was out there. I wanted to go chase it. And, they encouraged that. But like I said, growing up on the Southern Oregon coast, I got to hunt Roosevelt elk and black-tailed deer with the bow.
Wow.
And so, these dream species that some people, wait a lifetime. Well, that's what I cut my teeth on. Wow. And from there, like I said, I went to Wisconsin for college. That really immersed me in some of the whitetail world, and really got to experience some great deer hunting in Wisconsin. At the time I was there, the numbers were very high. There was a lot of opportunity, a lot of chance to get out and archery hunt and also, gun hunt. I mean, it was ample herds to chase. And so, basically ever since then, man, everywhere I've gone, I've just loved the different experiences. And so, I'm not specific. I'll hunt with a muzzleloader. I'll hunt with a bow. I'll hunt with a rifle, shotgun. I mean, I just love being out. And I'm fortunate enough to have a wife that's just as supportive and hunts as much as I do. And now we've got a 9-year-old son that this year he was past hunter safety and he's able to duck hunt. And so we actually didn't get a lot of big game hunting in this year, trying to get him out there blazing away at ducks, and he had a great time doing it. And so, it's just our way of life. And I found a career, that I was able to combine my passion and, keep doing what I love. And at the same time, help ensure that, wildlife's around for future generations. And my son has the same opportunities I did.
Man, isn't that what it's all about? I mean, at the end of the day, we talk about it all the time, but I think we have to continue to talk about it all the time. It's just the progression of a hunter, and what a great way for you to get, I didn't know this when I was just a hardcore deer hunter in Illinois, that I could get so addicted to waterfowl hunting, and what I realized real quick was the difference of sociability while you're hunting is so much different. Cause like, you know what I'm talking about? Like you go on a big game hunt. Yeah, man. I mean, if you've done it all your life and you can go sit in a deer stand for 12 hours and be by yourself and nothing happens and you're okay without seeing a single deer that day or whatever, you still come back from the hunt and you're like, yeah, man, that was a good hunt, and I saw a red-headed woodpecker today or whatever it was, right? And with waterfowl hunting, I found that, my gosh, what a great segue to just get, especially the younger generation that needs to stay engaged. What a great way to do that. So kudos to you for allowing your son and getting into that. I mean, that's just, I think it's just a great way to get young people into hunting.
Yeah,
for sure.
When it comes to, just the backstory of Pope and Young, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say a different podcast I heard that wasn't the inspiration for starting Pope and Young, because the history of the big game hunting in the United States was it was so depleted at one time that they were like, we need to put an emphasis on trying to kill a certain setting a benchmark, I guess.
I think it goes before that, actually.
And correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I'm just trying to remember exactly why they put that in place.
No, it gets there.
Yeah, I mean, in the very beginning, it all started with, late 1800s, and Boone and Crockett had seen that, wildlife populations were pretty much gone. And so trophy has a very negative connotation today. Right. But realistically, that idea of trophy hunting, back then was that the populations could not sustain, female and young buck harvest. Mm-hmm. And so for hunting to continue, they instituted this idea of trophy hunting beyond its, breeding age, and that therefore it would not affect the population, but the tradition of hunting could continue. And again, that was 1887 was that. 1961 is when Pope and Young was officially founded, and the National Field Archery Association had kind of been keeping records before that. But interestingly enough, our founder was the first member. Boone and Crockett had a rule that you had to take with a rifle 3 big game animals in fair chase. And the founder of Pope and Young took those 3 animals with a bow, and it was kind of a big deal when they let him in, because written in the bylaws, it had to be done with a rifle, and he did it with a bow. And then he approached Boone and Crockett and said, hey, you know, there's this archery hunting thing. It's kind of getting some traction, but there's a lot of states that don't think it's a valid method of harvest. You guys have this great recording system that you're using to track conservation. Could I do this same thing with archery taken trophies to prove to these states the validity of bow hunting? And so that was the true origins of, you know, Pope and Young's records program. You know, and they also wanted to be a major conservation force, you know, giving bow hunters a voice. And so that was the beginning of Pope and Young. And they adopted the fair chase rules, the ethics of the hunt, you know, keeping the harvest on the older mature males to not have a negative, you know, effect on populations. Today we see, I mean, things have changed a lot. You know, there's places we're not shooting enough deer. And so some of these ideas of being all hung up on just size, it carries over from a time when it was a necessity, you know, but today in most cases, you can pretty much get whatever you want. You're not going to harm a population.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And, you know, the thing that I find interesting about it is, you know, kind of take our listeners through, you know, who Pope and Young were, you know, who they were as people, what they were doing, and why they were doing what they were doing.
So, I mean, the very founding, you know, there was a Yanni Indian Ishi that was the last of his tribe that came out of the mountains in Northern California. His whole tribe had been killed. He was trying to live on his own. And Pope and Young were 2 people that worked at the university that kind of befriended him. And so they learned from him how to bow hunt. Wow. And so those two people were kind of the pioneers, and they went to Africa. They actually went to Yellowstone to hunt grizzlies. Wow. You know, it was a different time, but that's our namesake, was those two, their writings and the work that they did was kind of the very beginning of bow hunting. Now, obviously there's been, you know, field archery and archery competitions for decades, but the actual bow hunting, you know, in North America can be traced to those 2 guys. And that's why, you know, that's our namesake.
Wow. Wow. It's just crazy to me to think about that in the wake of an era, like I always try to tell people sometimes, like, you don't know what it was like during the Cold War. All right. All right. Like when Reagan came on, shit started happening. You know, right. But think about that from the outdoor industry perspective, right? They're coming off the wake of commercial harvest, depleted numbers, hunters have a bad name. And these guys were smart enough to say, wait a minute. Listen, if it's a trophy, typically it's older. Yep. It's like, I think the greatest example, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the best examples I like to use is a grizzly bear. All right. For native species here to North America. And that is, look, if you don't take out this big ass grizzly bear, this dominant guy, he is actually starting to take away from the species. And I mean, yeah, we can use people's emotions a little bit, but dude, they're brutal. Life in the animal world, they don't give a crap. Okay. Yeah. And it's like, all right, well, I want to breed you, and you have Joe's cubs, and I'm just going to rip their heads off and eat them.
Yeah.
And I mean, but the forethought, here's what sometimes my brain spins down some rabbit holes, but the forethought of these guys to think of this and it still apply now, what is it, 60 something years later, is crazy to me. I mean, the vision, all right, that something can still apply to what we do today is, and everybody knows if you're, I mean, I guess I shouldn't say everybody, but if you're a hunter, if you've been around hunting for a while, one of the greatest things that conservation has ever done was hunters getting involved. Like we literally saved species all across the board, whether it go from bison to a canvasback. It's been the hunters that have done that, and the forethought and the vision of that with these guys is incredible. And I just, man, I could sit down, like, I want to go into a shop with like a historian that's like, look, dude, my cousin's brother was best friends with Mr. Pope himself. And I want to be like, dude, I just want to drill down.
One thing in particular and I hate to keep bringing up the whitetail stuff because I know Pope and Young's got a.
Oh, we'll talk about it because we're going to talk about Chuck Adams.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I got to. But there's so many other aspects of it. But just the whitetail stuff to us, it's like, and today is like a hunting industry where everybody shoots a 170-inch deer. It's just, that's what you do, like.
Right.
But I'm sitting here like the biggest deer I've shot's like 110, 115 inches. And
dude, I went all season this year with primitive equipment. I went back to primitive equipment this year, Justin.
Yeah.
I didn't get a deer.
But right. And I think, one thing to me, it's like, because of what Oma did, grandma, that's no doubt in my mind when I finally get one, I want to have it entered just for the principle of like, she did it. I just want to be a part of that. And it's just something that means a lot. And I know today it's like, it's crazy that 125-inch deer is like not that cool anymore. But to me, it's like, I think it's pretty damn cool, No,
and you bring up, go ahead, Justin.
No, I was going to say, I mean, 125-inch deer, we talk a lot about, would there be a potential, reason to increase that minimum? Certainly. But again, you got to realize, like, this is a historical record, right?
Yeah.
Both BNC and Pope and Young are using these records to show people, the conservation successes and the changes that we've seen in the industry and, changing landscape types and everything. I mean, that's what these records show. And so if we, we've got to remember that at a time, 125-inch deer was an absolute trophy of a lifetime.
Yes.
Just because we're at a point now that it's not as difficult to obtain that, it doesn't take anything more away from that deer, and
right.
I hear a lot of people say, oh, I only put my biggest in there. Man, that, we want to be able to say, hey, I mean, Pike County, Illinois, what's happened there over the time? It gets popular. Those records will show you, okay, what happens to an area when it gets broadcasted? What happens, when harvest increases? Do you see that in turn in these records? And so anything that makes any record book, put it in all of them that it qualifies for, because this isn't purely just, to get your name in a book, which the history piece of it's amazing. Like,
right.
I've got a couple animals that I got that squeaked in because I got really lucky with tags. And yeah, I have a lot of pride having that certificate there and being in that book. But, it's the history of look at the bears in the southeastern United States. They're coming back. There's more being taken there. That all shows up in this record. And that's why every single qualifying animal is just as important as the next world record to the mission of ensuring the conservation of these species continue.
Yeah. No, you said that.
Duck hunters, y'all need to check out Williamson Outfitters down on the Florida Panhandle this season. They offer some of the best coastal duck hunting and inshore fishing east of the Mississippi, targeting species like redheads, bluebills, buffleheads, and canvasbacks, just to name a few. From the cast and blast packages for those who love to fish and hunt, to adrenaline-pumping layout boat hunts that get you up close and personal, Williamson Outfitters has it all. And when the day's done, unwind in comfort at one of the 2 amazing lodges designed to make you feel right at home after a successful day out on the water. Mention the One Hell of a Life podcast when booking and get 10% off your booking. Spots are filling up fast, so call or text Captain Chris today at 850-251-8650 or visit www.floridaducks.com.
Perfect, because
you did.
The camaraderie, the conservation aspect, absolutely, but also like the camaraderie of like at the Pope and Young Club, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to keep hunting alive for years and years and years, which ties into conservation. The fact that it's like we can be inclusive and like, man, like we're all like Billy from Dr. Duck always says, we're all on the same team.
Yep.
It's like high five, man. You got one in there. Like, we're on the same team, you know?
Right.
Like, it's a cool thing that there's
Well,
that,
and
you know?
here's something to be said too is, you know, how many times do y'all have watched, I'm going to use whitetails again, but it goes across all species, big game species. And that is, how many times have you watched a whitetail video and they say, we're going to take out this management bully buck? Dude, I love those deer. And, you know, a lot of those times we call them a book bumper, right? They're at that book bumper. But to me, if that son of a gun is going into an area and he's whooping everybody's ass, including the 200-inch deer, which we've all seen it. Like, if you watch them enough, there's that bully buck, that big-bodied 8-point, 9-point, whatever. It's 120 inches, 125 inches. And he's never going to get any bigger than that, but he runs the roost. You know, and to me, like, personally, I don't know how many people have thought about this, but if the trophy, that's the thing that's so great about hunting, is that we can all have the trophy that we want. Like, I've had a spike that's a trophy, you know, that kind of thing. But to me, I've got a 161-inch 9-point. I knew him for 3 years. I only saw him twice. And this is before cameras got, you know, really, really good. And when I shot this deer, I knew he was 7.5 years old. It was January 1st in Illinois. He still dressed 214 pounds with a 29-inch neck. All right. I said to myself, my God, I just shot the great prince from Bambi. I mean, this deer, he's right there today. I'm turning around looking at him. It wasn't what I originally envisioned of. I've missed deer way bigger than him, right? But that trophy, like, when I shot it, my wife looked at me and she goes, "Are you done?" I go, I'm done with 200 hours a year in the stand. How about that? You know what I mean? You know, because that deer did everything for me, man. I mean, it was that trophy that did it, you know? Well, and I think it's important that, you know, with Pope and Young, for example, and I'm going to dial back a second just to kind of preface where I'm going with this, is that we used to have the largest contiguous, privately owned piece of property in the state of Illinois. It's now part of public ground. The state of Illinois wanted to buy it for years, and by God, they figured out a way to do it, and that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But we had property that had not been hunted in 21 years outside of an uncle, and it was we actually had the state of Illinois. We had wildlife biologists come out, and they tagged deer and did a 6-year study on mature deer. That was their whole focus, is that we want to study mature deer. So they started, you know, tagging button bucks. They radio collared. They did the Kevlar collars. They did all of it. Trap. They would do aerial, all this stuff. Here's what the coolest thing, Justin, that I remember as a young man is after that 6 years went by, the biologist stopped by the house and said, "Hey, you guys want to hear the nutshell on our results?" And we're like, "Yeah, this is like the tip of technology, right?" We didn't have any trail cameras. As a matter of fact, I think right at that time they had just started developing those little things that where you could take a piece of thread and put it across a trail, and if the thread got hit, it would tell you what time it was. You know what I mean? So back in those days. And they said to us, 76% of bucks that are 4.5 years of age and older are never seen by a human being. Yep. Never seen. Never seen, bro. Never seen. So
it's crazy.
While Oma, you know, my mom was shooting these giant deer at that time, dude, this isn't with making the food plot the way I want, creating travel corridors, all that crap. This is a woman sitting 8 feet off the ground with a finger tab. Mm-hmm. All right, shooting giant deer. But it made me think that, man, how many times when I was growing up during that era that I would have killed to have 125-inch deer.
Right.
Yeah.
And what they told us was, this biologist, I remember telling my stepfather, he said, Jerry, he said, any deer that is over 140 inches, and we were in Brown County, Illinois. He said,
Right.
any deer over 140 inches is a freak of nature. It's there's uncommonalities whenever you start to get above that with natural vegetation, not supplemental feed. We didn't have any of that back then. It was just, you're in a natural area, and 140-inch deer is still a giant deer. I mean, for people that don't hunt, I mean, my goodness, 125-inch deer comes by me in Georgia, and it's going, I'm going to put it on the hood and drive it through the HOA.
Yeah, see, that's where I'm at with it. Like, it doesn't, I mean, I would love to shoot any size deer.
Look at the buck I shot last year, 110 inches.
Yeah.
I mean, it had a broadhead in its shoulder blade. It was wounded. Dude, that deer brought me to tears thinking about the experience and the harvest of that deer, everything leading up to that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep. No, I mean, and that's my kind of goal is just like to get one at some point. That's that. I mean, that would probably do it for my goals as a bow hunter, you know?
Well, and let me ask this. So let's kind of expand a little bit on the Pope and Young, and this Pope and Young has a record for all big game, correct?
Correct. Yep. All native North American big game species.
Okay. Can you kind of dive into that? How many there are? And then let's talk about Mr. Grand Slam, the first person that ever did it. And because he and Chuck, I hate to call you out right now, but there for a few years, you would call my mama on her birthday every year. And she was very beautiful. But kind of just help everybody understand like how it affects all species and what they do with that.
You know, I mean, yeah, it's everything from, you know, the bears of Alaska. You've got all the caribou species of all the Canadian provinces that we've seen, you know, declines in. And like, you can look at the woodland caribou and, you know, in recorded history, there's been 3 major declines and returns there. You know, I mentioned the bears, you know, the black bears a little bit in the Southeast, you know, stuff that we never saw before. I mean, I always tell people, you know, from a record standpoint, yeah, world records are cool. And don't get me wrong, or a state record, I love looking at it. But man, for the conservation side, when we start seeing areas that had never produced an animal before put something in the book, you know, that is cause for, you know, celebration. And then we've got, you know, the mountain game. I mean, the mountain goats, the sheep species of Canada, Alaska, you know, the Rockies, you know, that's one that, you know, an argument could still be made there that the only true ethical way to hunt a sheep would be kind of a trophy hunt situation. You know, a lot of states or provinces don't even allow the harvest of a ram until they've reached 8 years or more. And so, you know, each one of these species has a super unique story and archery, you know, archery side, history of the animal, where it was once historically, where it is today. You know, the season structures can all be kind of looked at. I mean, you know, you see a new technology added to a state. They allow something that they hadn't before, and you can actually watch the harvest regime switch the seasons, where you used to see it to, you know, maybe archery, or maybe they change the dates and then it gets shifted to rifle or something. And, you know, I mean, like I said, each one, obviously the whitetail world is huge. I mean, those deer in every state but 2. Obviously that's a major component of our records is the whitetails. But yeah, each one of these other species, you know, is just as important and you know, is just as interesting if you look at, you know, you mentioned those whitetail deer not being, you know, seen at you know, by people or whatever over 4.5. a blacktail deer will spend its entire life within 1 square mile.
No,
and that's
shit.
What?
Really?
That's what I grew up hunting.
Wow.
And
Are you kidding me?
These bucks are there. I mean, within reason, where I was on the coast, there is some migratory ones coming out of the Cascades. But where I live, these deer would spend their entire life less than 1 square mile. You'd find the sheds. You knew they were there. Man, you might catch them one time in early November. The peak pre-rut was your only chance. And it had to be raining, and it might happen 2 or 3 times in that deer's life. And so every single animal, there's stuff like that. There's just amazing once you start learning about it. And, and that's what drew me to this field. It was, wildlife management. And, the fascination with all these different unique lifestyles, even within the 5 species of deer we have, they're all super cool and super unique.
Man, that's crazy. I had no idea, but yeah, that's quite the challenge there.
The new thing that's been on my radar lately is these Sika deer.
Yeah.
Up in the Northeast. These swamp mugs, these little deer, these little baby buglers, they are a cool freaking deer.
They are, and then, I mean, they're, we don't track those. I mean, that's not a native species.
Oh, it's not.
They
Okay.
were introduced. But, it's another great opportunity. And, that one's kind of getting found out. There's some other hunts out there from some exotics that, in the 60s, I mean, people that went to college in the 60s for wildlife, one of their finals was, tell us what species could be introduced here to this habitat and thrive. I mean, that was the mentality back then. And a few of them have stuck around since then till today, like those Sika deer in the Northeast.
Oh.
Has going back to your time with Boone and Crockett with with scoring and entering and that kind of thing, do you have any and I'm just thinking this kind of off the cuff here, but any stories of people that I don't know, like it wasn't, they did it illegally, or I'm trying, you know what I mean? Like so I could, I've got a couple stories, but I'd always tell people, you got to remember, when I was there, I calculated, I'd looked at something between 10 and 12,000 entries.
Wow.
Holy
Out of those
cow.
10 or 12,000 entries that I personally looked at and reviewed, yes, there was a couple people that tried to cheat. And I will say, man, somebody that does something sketchy, people are so happy to turn them in.
Yes, they are. I.e. the fish weight video.
That was insane.
And so, and then, like I said, it was, 99.9% of hunters are like you and I. They're just out there with love the opportunity to even have a chance at a Boone and Crockett animal. They'd never do anything, outside the law or anything. The ones that do, you hear about a lot. It makes it seem way more prevalent than I ever really felt was happening.
I gotcha. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, how many total species does Pope and Young recognize?
So I was trying to think that we've also got all the antlered categories have a velvet category as well. And so for elk, you have velvet, typical, velvet, non-typical, typical, and non-typical. So, just the American elk alone is 4 categories.
I got you.
Wow. That's a lot.
I think it's 25 or 26 is the total species.
Gotcha. Now, let's talk a little bit about, let's talk about a little about Chuck. All right. So Chuck Adams, if you guys are not aware of who he is, you can follow him on all the socials. He's considered one of the beast modes of the industry as far as archery goes. I mean, I put him up there like he's my more new current Fred Bear. You know what I mean? This kind of guy, and he's still doing it, which is nuts. And we'll talk a little bit about. I think he broke the blacktail record and then broke it again in the same season last year for Pope and Young, unofficially, because you got to wait for
those. I mean, he went up to. I mean, he was by himself in the Alpine in Southeast Alaska chasing Sitka blacktails, and he did
by himself. He's in his 70s.
Yeah, it's very. I pray to God I'm able to do that.
Right?
Yeah,
I know it. That's what every time I see him post something, I'm like, dude, how does he do it? It's hard work, But now, correct me if I'm wrong. He was one of the first, or the first person to obtain all. He had a Pope and Young entry of all big game in the Pope and Young record book. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct. Yeah, that was before my time. I know there's a few that have done it as well, but I do believe he was the first.
Yeah. So just amazing. But going back to this whole thing with the history of this, you guys. One thing that we were talking a little bit off right before we started is I was telling Justin, I was like, I remember like growing up, like if you shot a deer that was 125 inches, you put it in the book and like by sword, like somebody standing next to you with a sword going, you're putting that son of a bitch in the book, aren't you? And you do. And I don't mean to mean this in a negative connotation, but Justin, help people understand where it was and where it is now, and why is the importance of this continued? Because I think there's something to say about the conservation piece that has to do with this and recording these things.
Yep. No, I mean, for sure. And I do think that it's just kind of a faction of, it's not as rare as it was at one point, which is a conservation success. I mean, there's so much in this world that's negative. Yeah. You look at what wildlife populations have done and the number of deer and the quality of deer, and that's important. I mean, we don't, they could look back now and these deer aren't getting recorded, they could look at history and say, man, the hunting must have really sucked in the, 2020s. They weren't putting in any trophies, whereas earlier on we were seeing quite a few more. I mean, that's what I was saying about, not moving the goalposts and having to get every one of them in there that we can.
Yeah.
That tells the history of hunting and like I said, I mean, look at how many world records are being broken with archery now, every single convention.
Yeah.
Our data set is going to say, what changed? This could bring up the technology aspect of archery and the leaps and bounds that we're seeing. Is that making us better as archery hunters? And that's why every single one of these animals is an important data point to look at. As a hunter, we'd never want to do anything that would negatively affect the resource.
Yep.
And the best way to judge that is to put these things in and look at it from the 10,000 foot level, not just the state, but hey, what's the upper Midwest doing? I mean, I remember a few years back, there was that EHD outbreak that was further north than they'd seen before. Mm-hmm. The next few years, there was not a lot of entries. But after that, we saw some absolute gargantuan deer pop up because there was more resources available.
Yeah.
And so those little things like that, that's why it's important to have those, is that conservation piece that you can glean from those records and, why I'm still doing it.
And, to kind of piggyback off that, for people that are listening to this and it's like, okay, I just shot one. How do I go about entering it in the book?
And before you go there, let me, this kind of ties into that too, Tristan, is explain what the requirements are. I mean, I don't want you to have to sit here and get detailed, but for example, you can't use electronics. Mm-hmm. You kind of go through like the basics of what it takes. Like,
that's a good point. Cause
like I want to go out and shoot. Like, for example, my mom back in the day, and this was more of a bigger deal back then, it was let off. Right? Mm-hmm. You can only have so much let off on your bow, and the newer bows today come with the let off more than what Pope and Young variants is. So talk about like those like equipment restrictions or et cetera to keep the what's the word I'm looking for? To keep the
within spec.
Yeah, within spec. There you go.
Well, and the biggest thing you got to realize on all these regulations, and both organizations kind of get painted in a corner of, the police of bow hunting. Is this technology good or is this technology bad? the end of the day, we're not opposed to any technology, right? That's not what we're saying. We're ensuring, the essence of fair chase is, the fair part of it is the animal's going to win more time than it isn't, right?
Yes.
It shouldn't be a foregone conclusion. And so some of these rules might seem a little arbitrary, but you've got to be able to draw a very easy line in the sand to point to and tell someone, man, you go beyond this, like it's getting too far. You're leaning too much on technology, and it's the animal has less of an ability to detect you, and your increased harvest may have a negative effect. And so that's really the root of these rules, and the main ones that most bow hunters need to know about now. The biggest thing is a sight that actually adjusts the pin for you. If it's got a range finding sight, yep,
Hashtag Garmin.
that range finding sight has crossed the line. Now, if is it that much different than a handheld rangefinder and an adjustable pin? Well, you could argue you can do the same thing with that, but that electronic going from where the hunter does it to where it's completely done automatically, that's where the organization drew that line and said, this might, this we feel is going too far away from the traditions of archery hunting.
Yeah. And just real quick on that one, I really like that one because, I mean, yeah, you're right. Like what you're saying about, you range find it and move your single pin or whatever, but you're still
it's in the teens that morning and maybe you're chasing ducks or geese, but now it's September and it's 85 degrees and you're hunting early teal or geese. As a waterfowler, you need dependable weather protection that will not break the bank. Founded in 1996, Frog Togs is not only the leader in breathable wader technology, but a company you can depend on to keep you warm and dry, head to toe, no matter your hunting environment. Stay bone dry by using discount code ZD315 for 15% off not only your first purchase, like most discount codes, but how about every single purchase you make from now until December 31st, 2024?
To move the reason I don't like single pin for deer hunting in Georgia and Illinois is because you're getting these deer between 20 and 40 yards when you shoot them, and if I don't want to have to take the extra movement to move.
Dude, Michael Waddell still says this day, he goes, I'm shooting variable sight.
Yeah, I don't want to take the extra movement to move my single pin and risk getting busted. So if you can do that, props.
Right. If you're out west and you got some muley bedded down, whatever. Again, it's all about like what's the reality worth, I guess. But here's the thing. Think about this, and I'm gonna play pawpaw a little bit here. But you said that Pope and Young started, was it 1961?
Correct.
Okay. Per my stepdad, that I will still to this day put on a legendary pedestal of involving whitetail archery deer hunting in Illinois. He was on the board, actually. They helped get it approved in the 50s. Whenever imagine this, y'all, you used to not be able to hunt deer in Illinois. All right. Then you could shoot one. Anyway, his whole thing was you could go out there and you're hunting, and you're hunting with a recurve bow, okay? These records and this establishment was set with that kind of technology. You're hunting with a recurve bow. I've hunted with a recurve bow in the last year, and I can tell you in a simple format, it will whoop your ass. All right? It's not easy. It is not easy, dude. And I mean, I've had some really tough times with like, do I take that shot? And it's all about being accurate, right? If I'd had my halon in my hand, it would have been smoked. I think there's something to be said about putting yourself in a position to enjoy the hunt that produces this trophy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, and it's hard. I mean, like I said, as the bad guys, the police on technology, we're not saying like if you don't do it with a self bow that you made your own arrows or whatever, you're somehow not a good bow hunter. You're just at a different point in your journey, right? But there does come a point where it's not archery, and hopefully at the pinnacle of somebody's, hunting career, they decide for them they want to shoot a recurve. That's wonderful,
Yep.
but it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that they're, a better person or anything by any means. It's just, that's what they're choosing to do. And that's the whole fair chase ethic. I mean, each person sets their own, I live in a state that, didn't allow trail cameras and does now. Personally, that's something that I don't personally use. Now, I don't judge anybody that does.
Sure.
I think that would probably change if I was, in a place that was a little, I'm in Montana now. A lot of our deer that I'm hunting later in the year are migratory. So I don't think they do me a lot of good anyway.
Right.
But, that's my personal choice. Is I just don't, to me, I don't want to use a camera. I don't want to deal with it, and I like that surprise of not knowing what might be there. Everybody's going to have that level. And for some people, it's a recurve, for some people it's archery. And, we don't ever want to call anybody out, but we do want to make sure, these seasons, like you said, they were developed the time frame when it was recurve bows and the technology was not near as developed as today. And that's what allowed the long season. The ample opportunity was, it was really darn hard to get something with the bow, and we want to make sure that it doesn't surpass that and get almost as easy as it could be, with a rifle or something like that, to ensure, that's our mission, preserving and promoting and protecting archery hunting. If archery gets as successful as rifle, the populations aren't going to sustain it. So we want to ensure that the tradition of archery and the challenge remains intact as we move forward.
Yeah, no, and that's where I was kind of digging with this and going with it full circle is, listen, if you are going out there and you're shooting a 125-inch deer with your super setup, look, man, there is something to be said about this primitive equipment. And when this equipment, all this stuff came on, and these changes started happening, Pope and Young had to have been like, hey, wait a minute. This is starting to exceed some boundaries on what's fair chase. Yeah. So can you kind of drill down I know there's like a few that are like really solid points, but we talked about let off the
all the technology. Yeah, you talked about the sight, but all of the different,
those main points that keep you from being able to put one in.
Right.
Like if I'm a new hunter and I'm like, dude, I want to put one in. What do I not do?
Like I said, the biggest thing was the that we had was the adjustable. We also had a rule that said you could not have lighted pins. That was just changed.
Oh, really?
That is
okay.
That is no longer the case. The let off rule, they stuck to that for a while, but they eventually, a lot of the bow manufacturers, it wasn't even available to have a 65% let off. So they did away with that rule. And so, the main fair chase was obviously legally, first and foremost, it has to be a legal taken animal. You cannot use electronics to guide a hunter to game. So I can't call my wife at work and say, hey, there's a giant bull in the field, get home. I've then guided her
Man,
to
that's
that.
I didn't know that one. That's a good one. Yeah. Sorry.
You see it a lot, mule deer hunters, they'll have, some states allow radio usage. They'll have an earpiece in with somebody on a ridge, talking someone into the deer. That's delivering real-time game, real-time wildlife data to the hunter. And that does,
same as a deer drive, which I know is popular in Michigan. You can't do that, right?
No, the deer drive, that one is, that is not a method that they feel is unfair to the deer. But when you're relying on the electronics, the same thing, we've got a cellular trail camera piece that was updated not long ago. The original rule said, if a cell trail camera was used at all, it was not eligible for entry. Well, if you look at that, technically I get a picture of a fawn on a cell camera. That deer's never eligible for its whole life the way it was written,
right.
Which is a little bit ridiculous, right? So both Pope and Young and Boone and Crockett looked at that and said, okay, what are we really worried about with transmitting images? We don't want somebody sitting in their house, watching a live feed on their computer and walking out and shooting the deer when it comes to a corn pile or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what we said on that one is, if the information elicits a real-time response. So, you know, you're going to go hunt this stand, you know, the morning you get up, you're drinking your coffee, your phone buzzes, and you see the deer's on the other side of the property. And so you go over there, and this comes to honesty, but that in the organization's opinion, that elicited a real-time response to that image you received. You switched where you were going to hunt. That would mean that one is not eligible. Now, you know, the night before you show up to camp, you don't know where you're going. You're going through your pictures from the week. You know, you see where a deer's been going. That's not a real-time image, right? That's not, I changed what I'm doing. This picture caused me to change what I was doing to try to kill. And that's the line in the sand we drew there.
Awesome. That's great stuff.
Tristan, you probably never heard this before, but I think it's a great time to share it. And I haven't thought about this in years, but you know, when I was talking about when we had the biologists on and they did all the collaring and all that stuff, I'll keep his name silent right now, but his young man at the time that hunted with us, and he was hunting. We knew about this deer just from the biologist, but nobody had ever seen him. And this deer was 100. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but let me put it this way. It was a giant. Okay, a giant. And it had a radio collar on it. He's walking to his stand on the same property one morning and encounters this deer face to face. The deer was just emaciated. And what had happened was it actually didn't have any testicles. It had apparently ripped them off a fence or something like that, and this deer was dying a slow, tragic death. And he was walking, the way I understand him telling the story is that he was walking to the stand, encountered this deer, and basically he Bear Grylls that thing with a knife and took it out. And I remember people saying to him, "You're putting that in the Pope and Young, right?" It was a non-typical, I'm talking world-class deer.
Wow.
World-class. Like, if I remember right, the bases were like 7-8 inches. I mean, just a world-class, it would have made non-typical Pope and Young. And he said, absolutely not. He said, that was not fair chase. I did not take that. And here's the point I'm making about that. I was probably 12 or 13 years old, and that still sits with me today.
Wow.
It still sits with me today, the integrity of this hunter that he took at that time. I'm sitting here 25, 30 years later, still admiring his integrity. You know what I mean? And isn't it so important that we, with the full keep of Pope and Young, that we continue to pass on the integrity of these things like you're talking about. At the end of the day, can somebody look up and see that you saw a trail cam picture that night and you went there the next, blah, 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 right? Did you do the right things? Like Tristan, I remember your football coach said, integrity is doing the right thing when nobody's looking.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I thought it was cool to share with y'all that there's a hunter that did that to me years ago that still resonates today.
No, and I think that ethical code, I mean, that is paramount for the future of hunting, right? Yeah. We are not the majority anymore. You know, 76, 78% of the country does not hunt, but approves of it.
Yeah.
You know, we really need to make sure that those high ethical standards, those people give us license to hunt, right? It's a public resource. The fact that they support it and they think what we're doing is ethical, it's sound game management.
Do you want coffee that doesn't suck? Get the Duck. Dirty Duck coffee is made specifically for the waterfowl enthusiast. Enjoy flavors like Morning Wood, Dark Dynasty, Cinnamon Teal Snickerdoodle, and First Flight to unlock the flavor that you'll enjoy in the blind for years to come. Our friends at Dirty Duck Coffee Company are now offering all Zero Duck 30 followers a 15% discount when you use code ZeroDuck15 on your next order.
You know, we're out there for the right reasons and putting back more than we're taking. That's why hunting's allowed to continue. And so taking the ethical high ground and having these set of rules, and no, it's not a free for all. No, it's not okay to, completely prevent the animal from detecting you, through the use of technology. That mentality that we're out there, we're going toe to toe. It's a fair encounter. In order for the wildlife funding, everything that comes with hunting to continue, the public has to continue to support us, and we have to remember that with any choices we make or we do.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and this is one thing I'm super thankful about. And if this is the first time you're hearing me talk about this, I know you'll agree with me on this because of the standards of Pope and Young. But, one thing my stepdad taught me at a young age was like, and this is back when we just had Polaroids and crap, right? He would be like, wipe that blood off that deer's face, stick his tongue in his mouth, close his mouth, show him or her, the doe, whatever it is, show that animal in its greatest look. Give it the most respect that you could show, because once you take a picture of it, back then, of course, was not even close to what it can do now when you take a picture of something. But it's just that somebody else is going to see that picture. And you don't want them to look at that and go, gosh, look at the tongue hanging out of that thing and the blood coming out of its nose and everything else. If you're really trying to give credit to the animal, show it in its best form. Like, we don't put people in a casket and say, all right, well, show them the way they look when they got in that head-on collision. What I mean? Right. I mean, we don't do that, and I think, and I still battle with so many people over this in waterfowl, there's this whole thing, belly up pictures, and it just drives me crazy, man. I'm like, dude, that's not showing the trophy. It's not showing its luminosity of their feathers and all these things. And I'm so thankful that I got taught that. And I just urge everybody out there listening that, the next time you take a picture of a pile, next time you take a picture of a deer, take the extra time, just a few minutes, to put the tongue back in that deer's mouth, close his mouth, wipe the blood off. Don't necessarily, unless you smoked it right in the heart, I guess you could show that shot. But give the animal every credit that you can.
Well, and, Justin, I didn't know that about 76, 78% of people that don't hunt approve hunting. It's always meant a lot to me. It's just something that, I don't know. Something I've always felt is people that don't understand why I do it. I feel like this obligation to try to make it more palatable for them, and just try to be not hide what I do, but just try to explain it a little better. Just try to make
them a broader spectrum of accepting.
Yes, put it in a better light, and I think that gets missed a lot. And I think, to your point, it's really important that we all try to do that the best we can, because we want those numbers to stay where they are, if not grow.
And that's the forethought of Pope and Young from the day one, is to take this thing and put it I think my stepfather he passed on to the other world knowing that Mel Johnson was the best bow hunter in history. When he shot that thing I think it was 1964 in Peoria, Illinois, with a recurve bow. Bro, I couldn't shoot a doe. I couldn't shoot a spike. I couldn't shoot a button buck with my recurve bow this year. Nothing. And I think I'm good. All right. This guy goes out there with a freaking flannel shirt and shoots this, what is it, 204? Well, it's still a standing record, right? 204 and something eights. Goodness gracious. I can't even imagine.
No, the other thing on that point too, and what my wife and I do a lot of is I do a lot of my social media feed. Yeah, there's a couple grip and grins on there, but it's covered up in food photos, and it's all cooking wild game.
Yeah,
I love that aspect of it.
I think that's a huge thing that a lot of people, and a lot of the generation that are looking at coming into hunting now, they're a little bit put off about, just the aspect of chasing the biggest buck or the biggest bull. They want the food piece. we're actually doing something at our convention this year on the Wednesday, the beginning of convention, April 9th in Phoenix. We're having a wild game cook-off.
That's
and
awesome.
Camp Chef is, and the whole idea is showing folks that, like, yeah, I mean, we're hunting those mature animals, but we're not wasting anything. We're feeding our family with it. We're making that decision to pursue that older age class animal because we love hunting and we love making it harder on ourselves. But it's never just about the biggest and best. It's about, the whole experience, honoring the animal,
Yes.
Honoring every piece of it, putting it all, remembering it through a photo or taxidermy. It's not just about that head. It's about the whole thing.
Yes.
And I don't think we can say that enough in any forum.
Yeah, no, you're so right, man. I'm challenging anybody listening to this tonight is like, if you have not harvested, I don't care what it is. It can be a small game, big game. It doesn't matter. If you have not harvested an animal and eaten it,
Yeah.
you've skinned it, you've prepared it, however you want to do it. I don't care. I'm not going to throw shade on all you jalapeno popper duck guys. You ruining the meat. I'm sorry, yar. But because you're cooking it past medium. But the point is that the younger generation, one thing I think that is it's definitely a trend right now, and it's going to continue to go that way with our new administration, is health. And what more can you do to be healthy than to take an animal that was free chase that you took and you put that in your family's bellies? I mean, it's a pretty special thing. And if you haven't experienced that, man, there's nothing like it. I mean, there's nothing like it. And don't get caught up on the whole wild game tastes like gamey. No, you got to learn. If all you've done is taken that stuff to a processor and then turned around and tried to eat it and thought it didn't taste good, you're missing a whole boat. There's so many resources out there now. You kill any animal, honestly, just put it in there and just say, what's the best way to cook deer back straps, or how do you eat a beaver, or whatever. There's so many great recipes out there.
No, I do have to say, I still haven't figured out how to eat a scoter other than the popper, but I generally.
Well, the same can say about a coot, right? I mean, I've talked to people in Louisiana that are like, if you even say that you don't like coot, you'll get slapped in the face, like a slap contest. Like, they will slap you hard, dude, because they love that poodoo.
Man, I think there's so much of this stuff that it comes down to the way you can dress it up, and that's actually one thing I have always enjoyed is like bringing people to our house. Like, for example, just real quick, we had my wife's friend from work and her husband over one time, and I was just, one of the things I've loved doing is slow cooking deer and making it into like either taquitos or tacos. So I'll make.
Is that stuff with that cojita cheese?
Yeah.
Oh, baby.
So I'll make like carnita style, meat out of the
shredded.
Yeah, and out of just a shoulder roast or whatever. Well, I make these taquitos and didn't even think about the fact that these people have never eaten deer before. Didn't tell them shit about it. I just made them these taquitos. That's pretty good. And then, and not even that night. It didn't even get brought up that night, but it got brought up like later. Katie was telling her at work, like,
you mean I eat a deer?
Yeah, and it's just one of those things, but it's so good that you would have had, you had no idea. It tastes like a taquito you get at your local Mexican restaurant.
Yeah, man. I mean, we could spend a whole podcast on preparation and I mean, it's a big deal, but I will just say this to keep it simple. If you've eaten wild game, whatever it is, and I mean, let's go with one of the toughest, squirrel, right? Or beaver. You got to learn how to prepare it. And if you learn how to prepare it, you'll love it. Here's the other thing that comes along with that is your upbringing. So if all you've done is eaten regular beef all your life and you go to eat grass-fed cattle, you'll be like, bleh. It tastes terrible. A lot of this has to do with just your upbringing and what you like. Like some people ask me, like, why do you eat sardines? I'm like, because my dad did, and I like them. I acquired a taste for it. There's definitely something to be said about that. But I think really, it just comes down to, you're not going to McDonald's. All right. If you just take a little time outside the fast food restaurant style and just like prepare the food, you'll be amazed how great it tastes.
Justin, go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, you could even make it taste like McDonald's. My personal favorite, I took a moose back strap and recreated an Arby's beef and cheddar out of it.
Really? That sounds pretty damn good.
What a YouTube, dude! We need to do a YouTube for that, because that, like, I'm looking at this thumbnail right now with Justin going, "Hey," like Mr. Beast, and he's like, you know what I mean?
That's great.
That's good stuff.
Before we get out of here, Justin, to circle back on the person that's listening to this and they just shot their first, Pope and Young, whatever it is, what's the official process to enter this, and how do you go about doing
how do you support and join Pope and Young Club?
The website's a great place to jump on, and you can jump on as a general member. You do not have to be a member to enter a trophy. If you get one that you think qualifies, there's, do a quick number on it. I mean, there's a lot of things out there that'll get you kind of ballpark close.
Yep.
And if you think you got one that qualified, you get on that website and that'll give you a list of all the measures around you. And, it's a 60-day drying period to have one officially scored. So, take it to the taxidermist, get it cleaned up, whatever, make sure it's dried 60 days and reach out to them. And then they'll walk you through the process. They'll get you, there's some forms on there that ask about, shot recovery, things like that, just demographic data that we feel is useful to keep track of. But they'll help you walk through all that process and submit that to Pope and Young, and then those are all reviewed. So that's the basics is, reach out, get to the website, check out, what your local measures are. And you'd be surprised. There's, a lot of times like, I didn't know that person scored, and
I imagine you guys even give the ability to, like, what if I want to be an official scorer?
Yeah. And it's, we do offer courses on that. It's, again, it's a data set. So it's a 4-day, very intensive course where you learn to score everything. There's not levels of measures. Like if you're an official measure, there's tests, there's quizzes, there's a big 3-hour final test. So we really put these people kind of through the ringer, to ensure that this scoring is done uniform across the board as well.
I love to hear that. No, that's good to hear that. I didn't know that. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well,
and like I mentioned, we've got our convention coming up April 9 through 12 in Phoenix. If you're in the area, swing in, check out what we're about. We got that wild game cooking contest. We've got seminars. We've got, all the top bow hunting outfitters are going to be there. Chuck Adams is everyone I've ever been to. He's been out along with a bunch of the other bow hunting legends. And so it's a great opportunity to get involved, and we'd love to see everybody there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome.
And not counting that there will be tons of bucks to look at.
Yeah, I think last count we have 193 animals coming.
Oh,
holy
my.
cow.
Think about the logistics of that. Like, look, your job is you are chief of operations of Deerhead Shipping.
Yeah.
You're like, and by the way,
do not fuck
do
it up.
not, by the way, don't move a hair on these deer.
One last thing, Justin, before we get out of here, is there anything else that coming up for Pope and Young, or any just events or anything that you would want to plug on here that maybe somebody might want to go see or something like that?
Like I said, I mean, our big thing, we do our convention every 2 years, and that's kind of our big show that's coming up here in April. But, jump on the website. We've always got stuff going on. We do regional events around the country. We do them, Texas, Utah. We've done them in Minnesota. And so all that stuff would be on the website. So, yeah, get on there, get signed up. We'd love to have you as a member, support bow hunting, in its future. By becoming a member, you'll get our magazine. You get all of our, correspondence that talk about conservation issues and different bow hunting things. And, maybe you could get involved. Maybe there's something going on in your state that we'll reach out and say, hey, they're discussing this rule change, or they're looking at this season structure. Reach out to your, your representative. And so, just being involved at any level, we'd love to have everybody on board.
That's awesome. And the only thing I'm going to close out with, because I'm such an addicted duck hunter with a deep bow hunting deer background, is Justin, if we can ever share a blind with you and your boy, we'd love to do that.
Absolutely.
Oh man, I appreciate that offer.
Sounds good, man. Well, thank you so much, Justin. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and good luck. Good luck.
Yep.
We really
Thanks, guys.
appreciate what you guys do.
I've been southbound, I've been hellbound, riding on the midnight train. Going too fast now, think I'll slow down, standing in the pouring rain.